Hello. Hello.
Morning, sir.
Good morning. Sorry for the slight delay. There was some firewall issue.
Oh, okay, sir. Okay, no
Yeah.
worries, sir.
Okay.
Can we start, sir?
Yeah, we can start.
Yeah.
Got it, sir?
Good morning, sir.
Yes, sir.
Good
Dr.
morning.
Naveen MB, sir. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, sir. Good morning. Sorry, I did not expect the firewall to block Cisco.
Okay,
So
sir.
then I had to just tell the IT department here to enable Cisco
Fine, sir.
Apex. So that took another 5-10 minutes. I'm sorry.
No issues, sir. No issues, sir. Sir, shall we start, sir?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Good morning to all the participants. Uh, I welcome wholeheartedly the today's session speaker, Dr. Naveen MB, professor in the Department of Electrical Engineering, Indian Institute of Technology, Dharwad. Yeah. Siddiq, sir, please.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Good morning, everyone. Today I'm here to present a brief biodata of our speaker, Dr. Naveen MB. Dr. Naveen Mysore Balasubramanya, he received his BE degree in Electronics and Communication from NI Mysore in the year 2005, and he received his MS degree in Electrical Engineering from University of Colorado, USA 2010, and PhD in Electrical and Computer Engineering from University of British Columbia, Vancouver in the year 2017. Since 2018 September, he has been assistant professor at IIT Dharwad, Karnataka. He has very rich academic as well as industrial R&D experience. He has worked as a postdoctoral research associate at Heriot Watt University, Edinburgh, UK, and as senior design engineer for ADSL, WiMAX, and LT systems in leading communication industries such as Atlantic Communications, Intel Private India Limited, Broadcom Communication India Private Limited, and Tata Elxsi Limited, Bangalore. His research interests are broadly in theory and practical aspects of wireless communications with focus on next generation communication technologies and energy efficient IoT. He has several publications in reputed journals and conferences in the field of wireless communications, and also he has 3 US patents to his name. I welcome Dr. Naveen MB and request him to take our session.
Thank you very much for
Welcome,
the
sir. Yes.
introduction.
Yes.
Yeah, maybe I'll just share my screen.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so are you able to see the screen?
Yes, sir. We're able to see, sir.
Okay. So, as you all know, I'll be handing 2 sessions today. The first one is on energy efficient IoT using LTE, or in other words, how can we make LTE energy efficient such that it will become applicable for IoT? That is the first session. Second session will be on NOMA and grant free access, which are slightly more advanced technologies towards, say, improved 4G and upcoming 5G. Okay, so with this brief introduction, I'll start the session, and I expect the session to be very interactive. It will not be like I'll go on speaking for 1.5 hours and at the end you will ask all the questions. So please feel free to ask any question in the middle itself. Like you feel free to stop me and ask any questions in between, because as you can see, I'm not a person who goes by the number of slides. So you may see that there are only 42 slides here, but believe me, I can even extend this session for 3 hours just with these 42 slides. So you have to gain all the required information from whatever the slides are there and whatever information that I am giving you. Please feel free to ask any question. Don't feel that any question is silly or maybe it's not relevant. You can definitely ask any question. Okay, so so this prediction was done in way back in 2016. Okay, that by 2021 lot of the people in the world will have LTE. Something like in Asia there will be 50% LTE solutions. We agree with that, right? Even now we have so much of 4G phones already entering the market. Easily we can tell that in India it's more than 50% the amount of people having LTE. Okay, and if you go to say North America, you will see that 95% of them will be having LTE by the end of 2021. That is okay. And the same is with Europe. 95% will be having LTE. So why I'm selling all this is because how much ever new technologies are coming up, like 5G is coming up, or people have already started researching on 6G, what exists in the world as an infrastructure, as a working solution, and as something available to the general public is actually LTE. So it makes a lot of sense to optimize LTE so that you can have better solutions using LTE itself. Okay. So the whole point of putting this slide is let new technologies come up at this point in time in the world, and for the next say 5-6 years the most dominant technology, wireless technology, will be the 4G LTE solution. Okay. Now, but the kind of demands are changing radically. Okay. Previously, what did you think when you thought of a mobile phone, or when you thought of a phone in general? We just thought that phone means it should be able to make calls. Okay, then mobile phones came. It's like, okay, I'll be able to make calls and I need not have a wire or anything. I can carry it along with me. So wherever I am, I should be able to get a signal, make phone calls, and then say send messages. This was the initial concept of a mobile phone. But later, with the advent of data technologies, like how you can support data over mobile devices, people started thinking that phone is not now only for making calls and sending messages. I can use phone as a tool to connect to the internet and browse and get whatever services I want. Okay. So if you see now, fixed still, if you think there are no fixed phones, you are wrong. There are so many fixed phones still. For example, in institutes like educational institutes also, you will always have a fixed office phone number, right? Even at least you'll have one per department minimum, you will have a fixed phone. So it's not like fixed phone has gone off from the market. There are fixed phones, but what you can see is if there are 1.3 fixed phones billion fixed phones in 2015, in 2021, that is in this year, after 6 years, the amount of increase is 0.1 billion. The amount of increase is extremely small in the number of fixed phones. But if you see the next one, which is mobile phones, the amount of increase is larger. It has grown by almost more than 1.5 billion. So it was 7.1 billion in 2015. This is over the world, by the way. Okay. Now it is going to 8.7 billion devices, mobile phones. And similarly with tablets, and you have now lot of consumer electronics which are connecting to the internet. So for example, a lot of you may have smart watches which may directly connect to the internet or connect to the internet through your phone. Okay. And you will have a lot of other smart devices such as these we call them as M2M and cellular consumer electronics. That is like your smart meters. For example, Government of India and Government of Karnataka, they have taken the initiative to replace all your electricity meters with smart meters, right? So that smart meters, they directly access the internet. And look at that growth. It has almost doubled compared to what it was just 6 years ago. Okay. The consumer electronics and the M2M cellular consumer electronics. Any questions? I see someone's okay. Yeah. So basically it was just 2 billion in 2015. Now it will go up to 4.6 billion, almost double. And then there is this amazing last part, which is not a part of this talk, by the way. So it's called M2M non-cellular. Okay. Machine to machine communications, non-cellular, that has increased like 5 times, 2.6, and now it will be 10.7. So what is machine to machine non-cellular? Something which will not be using cellular communication, but maybe using some short range communication like Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, and so on. So now everything is becoming smart, right? To what some phone, what is that fan advertisement? I forgot, like Oriental or the one in which Dhoni comes. He will say, it's a smart fan. I can control the speed using my mobile, all that, right? So those are all non-cellular. Actually, they are not using any cellular communication there. They are using wireless communication, but not in the cellular frequencies. It's mostly in these Bluetooth and Wi-Fi regimes. That again is increasing by a huge fold. But our focus in this talk will be this second and third regions, which is M2M cellular and M2M cellular, mostly the second region actually, because even this is increasing by almost fourfold, 0.4 billion to 1.5 billion. So it's a huge amount of cellular devices that we have to support. Okay. And why is all of this coming up? Maybe you have seen this slide many times. It is because of the advent of Internet of Things, right? So basically, until now, people thought, okay, after the phone came, messages, data, everything came, everybody were happy if you are able to see YouTube videos without any buffering, or you are able to play a game without much glitch, and so on. But now the entire demand has changed. People have started using cellular for a lot of what we call as Internet of Things applications, such as smart city, where everything ranging from parking spaces to dustbin to lighting control, everything can be made smart by making it connect to the internet and controlling the way it behaves. Similarly, like you'll have many personalized IoT applications, which we discussed already. So you want to cycle, you want to track the amount of, you want to say, have a bicycle renting or a scooter renting solution, and you want to have it controlled directly through an internet server. That is possible. Then, I don't know, this is not picked up in India, but it's very famous in Western countries, something called a pet tracker. So you put a chip in your dog's collar basically, and you can sit in your office and find out where your dog is at your home, whether it is in the hall, whether it is in the room, or whether it is going and doing some mischief. You can just find out sitting at your office space what your dog is doing. This has picked up quite a bit in Western countries. Okay. And as I said before, smart grid, smart metering, where the meters are reporting the units, that is the power consumption units, periodically to a central server. And anything related to renewable energy generation, which has to be monitored and controlled, that is smart grid sort of applications. They also use the internet. And obviously assets monitoring in industry, especially if you consider some huge amount of shipments in a shipyard where they are storing lot of containers. You want to track where your uh, package is basically. Literally, people used to track it to a container level before. Now you can literally track in this container, in this whatever sub room in that container, my package exists. And all that is possible only because we are able to connect to the internet using what we call as things or very small devices. Similarly, we can have the applications in agriculture, from soil monitoring to again cattle tracking, and wildlife monitoring in forests, logistics, that is transportation, where your transport truck is, etc. Of course, home automation. This I think would be most familiar, where washing machine is smart, whatever light bulb is smart, lock is smart, and so on. Okay, all these are one class, and there is one another class called critical infrastructure. That is, you can even control the rods of the nuclear reactor through internet, as in using internet and making sure that the rods are entered properly. You can remove it sitting somewhere far, and so on. Okay, so coming to that, you can widely divide these IoT applications into two classes. One is called the massive IoT, another is called the critical IoT. So massive IoT, as I said, is for agriculture, metering, tracking. There the number of devices will be large, but you don't have much constraint in terms of delay and the amount of data you have to process or anything, because it's okay if my meter reports a result after 10 minutes, right? How much power, extra power I would have consumed in my house, compared to say reporting the meter result now and reporting the meter result at 10 minutes after this point. There won't be much of a change. Same thing in smart agriculture or many other such applications, tracking applications. What if like my truck is moving across India, say from Bangalore to it's moving till Delhi, it's okay if I report where the truck is after 10 minutes. It's not going to cause such a big havoc as such. Okay. So, but the challenge there is there will be large number of devices to support. The amount of data required is very small. And of course, they are low cost, low energy devices. But but there is no limit on the delay. I mean, you can be very much delay tolerant. However, in critical IoT, it's the opposite. You just cannot be delay tolerant. You have to make sure that your nuclear rod goes inside the reactor at the exact time. You cannot tell I'll put the rod there after 2 seconds, because we know, right, like radioactivity after 2 seconds, what is its performance, and before 2 seconds, like at that point, at t equal to 0, how much radiation will happen, t equal to 2, how much it will happen. So that's going to change radically. So we have to have some sort of a very small delay, like 1 millisecond or less than 5 millisecond latency, in order to have critical IoT applications. Same thing with traffic control. Let's say you're doing vehicle to vehicle communication, and you're trying to tell the vehicles that there is a turn coming ahead, or there is another vehicle coming on the turn, or there is a vehicle stuck on the turn. You cannot tell I'll tell it after 5 seconds or 10 seconds. By that time your car would have hit that broken car at the turn, right? It has to be as soon as possible, within 5 milliseconds, and so on, right? So those are critical IoT applications. And there is one very commercial critical IoT application. These are okay. These you can immediately guess this is very critical. I cannot make a turn after 10 seconds, and so on. Okay. It's not there in this rectangle here. I'll give you a hint. It's related to videos. Okay. A very commercial critical application. Can anyone take a guess? I've given a hint. It is related to videos. You can take a guess.
Is it about playing crickets?
Gaming is one thing.
Video streaming of the cricket?
Yeah, that is one possible application. But yeah, that basically it is critical because, like any game, not just cricket, if you are playing any game, you should not have a lag. Let's go one step deeper in it. So if somebody has played enough games, or they have done enough of video processing, they'll know this. Where do you think is the lag? Is it in the video screen, or is it in the audio? So you shoot someone, let's say in some game, the lag, is it in the audio or is in the video?
Lag will be in the videos.
Lag will be in the video. Are you sure? So you try out sometime.
Audio, sir.
Okay.
Audio, sir.
Actually, it will be audio, because
Yes, sir.
in fact, if you go to YouTube and see how the people test mobile phones performance, right? When they play a game, or even headphones performance, all these wireless headphones have come, right? The way they test their performance is when they play a game, how quickly they hear the audio. That you click and you shoot someone, they say that you hear it after half a second. So that they want to minimize. They want to get it to within 5 milliseconds. So that's one of the critical applications actually. And also in two more things related to video. One is subtitling. Okay. Again, you might have seen, right? Especially some other language movie or other language series, if they are subtitling in your language, for example. Okay. Say there is some English series, but the subtitle is coming in Kannada, or the opposite, Kannada series and subtitle is coming in English. You will see that, like, if you know both the languages, like for example, you watch Kannada movies with English subtitles, the person would have already spoken the dialogue. After 2 seconds, you will get the subtitle most of the time. So that is again a very big commercial application for critical IoT, where they want to minimize the delay between the actual speech and the subtitle that is coming up. Okay. Okay. So now these are the different applications of IoT. I have still not come to why LTE is required for all this. I'll come to that shortly. Before we go there, we need to understand a new term. This new term is called low power wide area. Okay. This is completely contradicting sort of term. Okay. Because until now, until very recently, what we knew was we can either have short range wireless, that is Bluetooth, Zigbee, okay, or we may improve, or we can have Wi-Fi, for example, for short range, again, up to 100 meters, all these things, Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, all these things. What problem it will cause? Even though they are so short range, they'll have very high power consumption. Okay, if you recall, all your Wi-Fi access points, they are always powered up to the socket, right? They are not battery powered. Do you think any of your Wi-Fi access points are battery powered? No, only when your mobile, if you make it as a hotspot, it will be powering up through the battery. Obviously, that's why if you put your mobile as a hotspot for 2 hours, it will be dead. The battery will be dead. So because all the short range technologies, they do consume significant amount of power. Of course, Bluetooth consumes less power compared to Wi-Fi, but in the end, the range is limited and power is also pretty high. So what people thought, at least one thing I'll improve the range. So that's where we have our cellular communication, all the 2G, 3G, 4G, even 5G. 5G also has a cellular part in it. Okay, so there the range got increased like anything, but power consumption still suffered, still consumes a lot of power. So again, a very easy example is, you keep talking in your mobile phone for almost 3 hours continuously. Let's say your battery started at 80%. After 3 hours of talking, I think it will go to around 30%. That is because cellular communication itself takes a lot of power. Okay. Same thing. That's why people report these metrics, right? 8 hours of continuous video playback, 8 hours of talk time. I mean, continuous talk time. Now you understand, like when people advertise their mobiles, everything, they report these numbers just to tell that from a power consumption perspective, they are good. Okay. So these were the main things. Now, as I motivated you through IoT applications, that many of them will need cellular communication, and IoT devices are so small, mostly they will be operating using AA batteries, just like your torch or something, a toy which your kid may have, some toy car your kid may have, or anything like that. Okay. So it may be very, very small device or very, very low power device. I can't put a cellular solution directly on that device, right? It's not even rechargeable most of the times. And if I put a AA battery for, let's say, a temperature sensor at your home, I want that battery at least to last for 3 months, 4 months minimum. I don't want to keep changing the batteries every 2 weeks, right? And if I put a cellular communication, that is, it will report the temperature sensor to your mobile wherever you are in India. If I tell like that, so let's say it's like this: you have a small, whatever. Basically, in Western countries, this is more applicable. They have something called a boiler room, because whole apartment has to be heated up, right? They are very cold there. So what they have is, they have a temperature sensor inside that boiler room. You should be able to see that temperature wherever you are, because if there is some high temperature, you can shut it down from your mobile here. Okay, so such applications and all, if I put cellular communication, and if I put the existing cellular communication, the amount of power it will draw, those batteries will run out within 10 days, within 15 days. So I cannot afford to have the existing cellular standards. So we have to change the way the existing cellular standards work for IoT applications. So what do we mean by that? It should still cover wide area, but it should consume low power. So this was an unattempted area before. Very difficult, right? Because what you do to increase the range? The easiest way to increase the range is bump up the power. Now we are telling contradictory statements. You reduce the power, but still increase the range. So that's where this new area came up, which is called the low power wide area. Okay. And now same thing. So in terms of performance, also I can write like exactly in terms of power consumption, we can also write in terms of performance. Cellular will have very good performance, but low power wide area will have slightly lower performance, okay, in terms of the amount of data rate it can offer. But that is fine, because IoT devices don't require too much data rate. Okay, so what we have learned until now is, because IoT has come and because existing world has so many LTE subscriptions, and LTE is also a cellular technology, can I tune LTE such that LTE also becomes a LPWA solution? Okay, that is my entire gist of this session. Okay, how can we tune LTE such that LTE can become an LPWA solution and it can support lot of IoT devices? Okay. So in this talk, I'll be focusing mostly on the massive IoT, not on the critical IoT. And what we know for sure is we have the requirements are also very, very different. As in, they are not consistent. Typically, what happens if you want very high performance, what you will think is, okay, I'll compromise on the battery life. Or if I want very high performance, I can compromise on some other thing. So typically see this in IoT applications itself, you might have some applications which are performance demanding. We might have some other applications which are not so much on performance, but they demand lot of coverage, or they demand say better positioning and so on, better battery life. So here we have sketched 4 applications. For example, let's take the industrial application, which is process monitoring and control. Okay, there you are worried about the performance, because remember, control is little critical. Though it is in massive IoT, it is slightly critical. So you need to have very good performance there. You're not too worried about the cost because you're deploying it as in the entire industry as such. So you are okay with putting more money for it. Okay. And you're not worried so much about battery life also, because mostly you will provide sockets and always have the devices powered up. Okay. So you're not too worried about the battery life and all. You are very worried about reliability, quality of service. You should have bidirectional data. Okay. Maybe you're not worried about positioning because you're not, these will all be fixed devices. There is no need to dynamically determine their position and all. See, so this set of requirements is entirely different from, let's say, a smart building. Okay. For smart building, yes, I can afford to have more cost. Okay. But I want to have very good battery life, because I don't want to keep changing the sensors, batteries, that is. I should have good coverage because buildings will have lot of indoor rooms and all, and I should have very good coverage. Okay. And most importantly, I should have extremely good security. Correct? See, the kind of requirement of this application is entirely different from what an industrial application did. Now, this is a huge challenge for any standard, right? Typically, what LTE has done until now, everybody requires high data. Everybody wants to see YouTube videos. I'll give them all very good data. Now you have like 2 different IoT applications, each demanding different data rates, each demanding different sort of quality of service itself. How will LTE deal with it, or how will any technology deal with it? It's a very big challenge. Okay. So how will any technology deal with it, which is the addressing these challenges? So what we notice is, take 100 such applications. Among them, 90 of them, that is 90% of the applications, will require long range, will require low power consumption. How much ever we tell we can compromise on cost on some applications, everyone wants to have things at low cost. And everybody wants to have some good quality of service, that is QoS, and scalability. That is, after 2 years, if I expand my building or if I expand my industry, I should be able to expand this solution also. Okay. So to this end, people, what they are thinking is, again, we will start using the bands which are below 1 gigahertz. See, you all might be thinking world is moving towards millimeter wave bands. Everybody is thinking of using gigahertz bands. There is other side of the coin where many people are thinking, I'll start reusing the old GSM bands. Can you tell one prime player right now in the market who has done that? Many operators, right? Airtel, Vodafone, so many operators are there. One operator who is right now reusing GSM bands? Again, I'll give one more hint. Because of this, they only have 4G. They don't have 2G or 3G.
Reliance, sir.
No, somebody answered in the chat box. It's
Oh.
Jio. Yeah,
Yeah.
Reliance, Jio are same. Yeah, true. So Jio is the one. what they did was, he was a very intelligent person. There were many unused GSM bands. He took that and started putting 4G solutions there. Okay, that is why there is no backward compatibility towards 3G or 2G. Your geo works only when there is 4G, basically. And remember this, they work in the sub 1 gigahertz bands. Many geo bands are below 1 gigahertz. Okay. So now you can give a technical reason as why you have better coverage, right? Sometimes if the band center frequency is smaller, there is a higher chance of having longer range, so better coverage. Okay. And similarly, low power consumption. How do you reduce power consumption? Like, when I ask these questions to our undergrad students, no, I get amazing answers, because youngsters think very differently. Not to tell I am too old, but people younger than me, I should tell, think very differently. I asked one of my students, how do you reduce power consumption? Sir, don't transmit anything from your mobile, only receive. This is one solution he told me. Actually, it is true. Though it sounds very funny, right? It's actually true. So for example, again, let's take any sensing device, like the temperature sensor or a fire sensor. Okay. How many times should the fire sensor keep on telling that there is no fire, there is no fire? No need to do that, right? It should only tell when there is fire. Or maybe once in 1 hour, it can tell over the past 1 hour, there has been no fire. Something like that. But once there is a fire, immediately it should tell. There is no need to have unnecessary reporting of status. So that means you avoid lot of unnecessary transmission. Okay. What do you mean by avoiding unnecessary transmission? Like, from core electronics and communication perspective, the transmission, I can call it as a duty cycle, right? Like, for some X amount of time it is transmitting, then it is not transmitting. So I can draw some sort of a pseudo waveform where it is actively transmitting for say 5 seconds, and then it is not at all doing anything for next say 100 seconds. So if I keep on drawing that as a periodic waveform, that will be what we call as the duty cycle of operation, right? Now I can reduce the duty cycling, the on time in that duty cycle. Okay, I can reduce the on time. So that will help me to reduce the amount of power consumption. Okay, anyone again, can you take a guess as compared to transmission and reception? If transmission takes power X, what do you think reception might take? Only receiving. Is it like half 0.5x or something else? Just a guess. I mean, again, there is no, depends on the applications and all. You can take a guess. So transmitting something takes say 1 watt. Receiving something takes how many watts? Can you take a guess? 0.25. Okay. So you're close. Actually, it's roughly 0.33, 1 by 3. And in some applications, it is in fact 0.25. Okay. So now you know, transmission is the guy who kills most of the time. So you might have noticed this. Again, I tend to give a lot of real life examples so that when somebody asks you why this is happening like this, you can give a proper technical reason. So you go behind a wall, suddenly you tend to lose signal. Okay. So afterwards, you will see that, okay, you're still getting signal, you are able to speak, but your phone is getting heated up if you continue to stay in that place. The reason is very simple. When you go behind a wall, you will experience something called shadowing, which is like high attenuation. The channel may go into a deep fade. So you'll have a high attenuation. And once you have such high attenuation, the only way to compensate it is through blasting it with more power. Okay. So when you are not behind the wall, the mobile was sending some power, let's say 19 dBm. Okay, but the moment you went behind the wall, it increased it to maximum power, which is 23 dBm, which is almost like 4 dB above. 4 dB means 6 times the power, right? Roughly 6 times the power is 4 dB. So see, that's why your phone gets heated up or the battery gets discharged. Whenever you have low signal and make a call, the amount of battery discharge will be higher than when you have better signal and make a call. You guys have observed all this, right? So you can link all this to the way LTE or any technology works. So again, because of this reason only, they started this new feature called Wi-Fi calling, all the operators. What they are telling is, if you are indoor and if your signal is bad, I'll route your call through Wi-Fi. Do you know of this feature? Many new phones have this feature, right? Wi-Fi calling, it's called. Airtel is definitely providing it. I don't know if other companies, vendors, but that's what, to save power again, because just if I use LTE, it will blast with high power. So I will take Wi-Fi's help and blast with low power. That is what they are aiming at. Okay. Okay. Next one. So now we know that the way to address these challenges is by making sure that we have long range by operating in some sub 1 gigahertz bands, optimizing the duty cycle, and of course, make it low cost by having very simple hardware or using license free bands, and making it scalable and meeting some QoS through multi antenna, or by having multiple small base stations instead of one large base station, and so on. Okay. Any questions up to this point? Okay, if there are no questions, now we will see what are the existing technologies in the market which can do all these things for you. Okay. Now that we can divide into two parts. One is called the proprietary LPWA technologies, and another one is called the standardized LPWA technologies. In the proprietary ones, there are many players. I'm sure you are familiar with at least one of these, which is LoRa, long range, because in your institutions, if you have any experiment related to Arduino, and if you have any, basically you all have your mini projects and your final year projects where people do something using Arduino, right? And any person doing something related to IoT there will have a Bluetooth module or a LoRa module if they want a longer range and so on. But do you know that LoRa is not yet standardized? The way it is being done, still it is being discussed for standardization in this LoRa WAN, LoRa Wide Area Network. The whatever chipsets you are getting now, they are not standardized. I mean, there is no rule that everybody has to follow the same set of protocols. Okay, so they are proprietary LPWA technologies. And what we are more interested in is some standardized technologies, because it's exactly like why you want your phone also to have some standard technology like LTE. You travel somewhere else, you go to a different state, it should still work. You go to a different country, it should still work, and so on, right? That's why you should have, that's where the globalization and the standardization comes into picture. That's why among the standardized LTE technologies, two of them are picking up like anything. One is called the eMTC, Enhanced Machine Type Communication, and another one is called Narrowband Internet of Things. And both of them are completely based on LTE. And these two are the major standardized technologies in the entire world. Okay. Or if I say that there are, say 50% of the world has standardized technology for IoT, then in that 50%, almost 90% will be either eMTC or NB-IoT. Only remaining that 10% will be LoRa or something else. Okay. So it's a huge chunk in the market, eMTC and NB-IoT. And if you want to play with these technologies, the core technology behind that is LTE. So if you understand LTE, you will easily understand both these technologies. Okay. Now, this we have already discussed. So if we want to first say to understand these technologies, we should understand LTE. Obviously, I have to tell how LTE evolved and what is there in LTE. So see, LTE started from 2008, actually, the research and the standardization. By 2010, they had their good release, like release 8, and 8 was the initial release, 9 then came up, and very, very stable release was 10, which I think most of our operators are using right now. Release 10 or release 11, one of these two is what most of the operators are using. Then by 2015, see, everything, all these IoT things, all these machine type communication, all these started coming only from 2015 onwards. Until then, we are only worried about improving data rate. So whatever was 75 Mbps in the downlink, we improved it to 300 Mbps. Then we improved it further to 1 Gbps. But people started recognizing that we should also have low cost MTC, device to device and all this. And of course, 5G, everything is evolving parallelly. Okay. Okay. So now when LTE gave its first IoT device, right? It was something called a Cat1 device, category 1 device. It was a very, very low complexity device, actually. It was operating on, I think, just 1.4 megahertz of bandwidth. Okay, just 1.4 megahertz of bandwidth it was operating on. And it had minimal features. I think it had 2 antennas initially. Okay. Then on that, they put some power saving mode. Then they did something called Cat0 device, which was furthermore simplified. I think they made it as one antenna here. Then they added some more enhanced power saving modes. All this I'll discuss now. And they improved the coverage. And finally, they got out these two devices called Cat-M and NB-IoT. This corresponds to the LTE machine type communication. This is the NB-IoT. And now this NB-IoT guy, right? It operates only on 180 kilohertz. Very small amount of band. Okay, 180 kilohertz. Why do you think someone came up with that? Anyone has a clue how much was GSM bandwidth? So GSM bandwidth was roughly 200 kilohertz. Okay. Okay, yeah, I have a question here. How different mobile companies decide power handling in mobile sets? No. Power handling in mobile sets only in terms of protocol. Okay, so Jio has its own LTE implementation. They won't implement. Usually they buy it from some vendor, someone from Taiwan or somewhere else. Airtel also buys it from someone else. Let's say Airtel bought it from Qualcomm. Qualcomm has an LTE modem, right? So let's say your mobile device, the device vendor actually buys it, not the operator. In fact, so let's say you have a maybe let's take Motorola phone with a Qualcomm processor, both Snapdragon and a modem, Qualcomm's modem. Let's take another one which has Samsung, which has Exynos and their own LTE modem. Okay. Now, whenever you plug in a SIM card, be it Jio SIM card or Airtel SIM card, the operator can only decide the way the call goes. Okay. So the operator can only decide, okay, this is the, I will make the call go through Wi-Fi or not through Wi-Fi. I'll make the call always go through only cellular. Only these aspects the operator can decide. Okay. The power consumption optimization is done by the modem manufacturer. So Qualcomm manufactures LTE modems, and then this thing, Exynos manufactures modems. Apple manufactures modems. Not many know it. They think Apple only manufactures phones. The modem inside Apple phone, many times it will be their own modem. Okay. So that there we do the power consumption optimization. Okay. Only thing the operator can tell is whether they can further improve or further reduce this power consumption by enabling, say, what we call as multi-step call making. That is, first your call goes from your phone to Wi-Fi and then from the Wi-Fi to the tower. Okay, that your operator can decide. Otherwise, all the power consumption optimization is done by the modem manufacturer. Okay, so I think by now it is clear, right? How power consumption is controlled and how LTE has come to very small devices. So my question was very simple, like GSM, what was the bandwidth? It was around 200 kilohertz. So again, why people started manufacturing IoT devices close to that bandwidth is there is a lot of unused GSM bands right now lying dead. You can make an IoT device which can operate in that band, and the amount of data rate that I require for an IoT device, I can easily support it within 200 kilohertz. That's why we have such devices coming to the market. Okay, so these I can jump through very quickly because I've already told this. So what LTE already achieves, it gives you best of CDMA and UMTS worlds. That is, it is better than 3G, and it gives you very high data rates. It supports voice, that is VoIP calling, what we know as voice over LTE, and it supports video conferencing, and it supports a lot of bandwidth, 1.4 megahertz to 20 megahertz, supports MIMO, IP based things. One interesting thing it supports is called inter-technology handoff. That is, you can hand off from LTE to 3G or LTE to 2G. That is all possible. Okay. And it has time TDD and FDD operations. Okay. Now, one main thing that you should know regarding LTE or whatever the new LTE for IoT, right? All of them use OFDMA in the downlink and SCFDMA in the uplink. So I think hopefully everyone is familiar with what is OFDMA. Basically, you have orthogonal frequency bands, and compared to normal FDMA, the bandwidth required for OFDMA will be much smaller, because whenever one carrier is having its peak, all others will have their nulls there. So that's how you can pack different carriers and you can create OFDMA. Why do you think people then didn't use OFDMA in the uplink? I mean, it is such a good technology. You can easily implement it using FFT, IFFT and all. Still, people didn't use it in the uplink. Again, can someone guess why they didn't use it in the uplink? So downlink is, yeah, power consumption, high PAPR, great. So it incurs more power consumption. That is because it has high PAPR. Okay, what is PAPR? Peak to average power ratio. So if you take the peak power consumption of OFDM divided by the average power consumption, it is high compared to this technology, which is SCFDMA. What SCFDMA is very easy actually. People think it is something very difficult, but actually it is like you do one DFT and then do the IFFT. OFDMA is IFFT, but if you do one DFT followed by IFFT, it becomes SCFDMA. Now the DFT size is obviously smaller than the original IFFT size. Okay, so what will DFT do? DFT will kind of put all the components, the input will be spread over all the output components, right? That spreading will reduce the peak to average power, and that's why SCFDMA will have lower PAPR compared to OFDMA. Okay, now what are the main channels in LTE? Synchronization channels, which is primary and secondary synchronization, broadcast channel, control channel, and data channel. Okay, these are all in the downlink. In uplink also there is this PUSCH, uplink data channel, and uplink control channel is also there. Now, why did I write these? Because this is something you cannot escape. Whether you go for IoT or don't go for IoT, you should still have synchronization channels, because then only your mobile will be able to connect to the network. Okay, you should have broadcast channel, because base station should periodically tell that, okay, this is the subframe number which is running now. This is my master information block. That is, this is my bandwidth. This is the number of antennas that I support. All this you should periodically keep broadcasting. So I just cannot compromise on both synchronization and broadcast channels. Then you need control channel. Why do you need control channel? To tell where is your data. Otherwise, you won't know where is your data. You have to search the entire band. So you need to have the control channel for that. And obviously you need the data channel to transmit the data. Okay. I think this I can skip. It is like further details on how a frame looks like. So LTE frame is 10 milliseconds, subframe is 1 millisecond, and each subframe will have different number of symbols. So in case of normal case, that is normal CP length, you have 14 symbols in the subframe. Okay, so that is just the structure. Similarly, if I plot this frame in as a time frequency grid, right? I told you there will be 14 symbols. So you see this 1 to 7, 1 to 7. So 7 symbols are called a slot, or 0.5 milliseconds is called a slot. So one subframe consists of 2 slots. And you see these R things. These are the pilots, pilot signals sent by the base station. Why do we require pilot signals? because the user has to estimate the channel, right? In our wireless communication, channel is the biggest culprit. If you don't know the channel, you just cannot process the information correctly. You cannot decode the information if you don't know at least some small things about the channel. In order to estimate that channel, you need pilots. That's why you have pilot signals being sent at these locations in the subframe. Okay, this is called a PRB pair. I mean, these are just terminologies. If you don't remember also, it's okay. All you need to remember is there will be pilots sent in the downlink along with the data and control information. Okay, so this is how a typical downlink frame looks like. See, every 5 milliseconds you have synchronization signals, the blue ones, PSS and SSS. Every 10 milliseconds you have broadcast, and every subframe has control information. Okay, and one message I have shown you, a downlink message called the paging message. Paging is an indication that there is something coming for you soon. Okay, it's like an alert message. Okay, so again, this is what happens in the downlink. All this stays the same. Okay, in IoT devices, all these stay the same. You still do CRC, you still do channel coding. That is, you use convolution coding for control channel and convolution turbo codes for data channel. Okay, and you do scrambling, you do modulation. Now everyone can easily guess, I think, with so much introduction. For IoT devices, do you think we will support 64 QAM, 16 QAM, 64 QAM? Now, by the way, now LTE supports even 256 QAM. For IoT devices, we support only QPSK. And for IoT devices, specifically, we have added BPSK again. See, isn't this a very good motivation to teach your classes now? Because students complain, no, why are we studying BPSK? Why are we studying QPSK? They are age-old technologies. Why should I use it? We can immediately tell, you want to do something in IoT, only modulation supported is BPSK, QPSK. So you better learn it correctly. Okay. So we support only BPSK and QPSK for IoT. Remaining things are all same. OFDMA, mapping, all these things are same. Like how we have downlink subframe, this is the uplink subframe. This is what your mobile sends. This is slightly different. So there, sorry, I'll just go back to that figure. See, here base station is kind of sprinkling the pilots, like one here, one here, one here, one here, this RR things. It's just simply getting sprinkled over subframes, over the different symbols. However, in the uplink, you have one dedicated symbol for pilot itself. These green symbols, they are dedicated for pilots. Okay, and the blue ones are dedicated for data or control, actually. So it sends control separately, it sends data separately. Okay, and there is something else. This is an optional thing called sounding reference signal, which is to tell that I am here, sort of thing. This is an optional thing, you can ignore that. But others, you have to be familiar that in uplink you have entire symbols as pilots. Okay, again the extension question. Okay, so why do we need one full symbol in the uplink? But why is it that in downlink base station can afford to have lower number of pilots? No answer. The question is very simple. In downlink, you have very few pilots compared to uplink. Security, no. Everything, like, there is nothing like downlink has to be less secure than uplink, right? Everything has to be secure. So what is downlink? Base station is sending common information to lot of things or user specific information. That is also possible, right? Uplink, what do you think about uplink. So each user might be located at an entirely different region, right? One user's channel can be drastically different from other users' channel. Second reason. Then that can happen even in the downlink also. One user's channel in the downlink is entirely different from the user channel in the uplink. But what about the power? Who has more power? Base station has more power or user has more power? Base station has more power, right? So I can send fewer pilots but at higher power. But as a user, my power is very limited. But I still want my channel to be estimated correctly. So I send more pilots with slightly lower power. That is the reason why you have fewer pilots in the downlink and more pilots in the uplink. It's fewer pilots with higher power in the downlink, more pilots with low power in the uplink. Okay. Similar to how we had downlink processing, we can also have uplink processing where it uses convolution turbo codes, interleaving, scrambling. This DFT followed by OFDM is nothing but SCFDMA. So that's how your data gets transmitted, regardless of whether you use LTE for IoT or for broadband. Only change is for broadband you support higher modulation schemes, but for IoT you support only BPSK and QPSK. Okay, so next two slides, these should be I think some new learning for you. What happens as soon as your LTE mobile powers up? That is, you have switched off your mobile or battery went off, you recharged it and then you switched it on. The first thing it does is it synchronizes to the base station. How does it do it? It has to gather the PSS and SSS, primary and secondary synchronization signals. Now, each base station has a unique ID, okay? And LTE supports 504 different IDs. It is supported using 3 PSSs and 168 SSS. 3 into 168 is 504. So now your mobile, no, it has to check with all the 504 combinations. Is it PSS number 1, SSS number 1, PSS number 1, SSS number 2, like that. All 504 combinations it has to check. One of them will give it the best correlation peak. That it will decide as, okay, this is my signal. Okay. Can you take a guess what is the standard time proposed to do all this? It has to check over all 504 combinations and log into the best PSS and SSS. Do you know what is the average time for this to be done? It's less than 5 seconds. So you power it up, less than 5 seconds, you should be able to get a signal. If you are in a reasonable place. If you are behind some wall or in some forest area and all, this is not applicable. But most of the other cases, wherever you have reasonable signal, within 5 seconds, you should be able to get the synchronization. The moment you get synchronization, you will start getting those bars, signal bars on your mobile phone. Okay. Then you just cannot simply transmit data as soon as you got the signal. Okay. You have to make a request to the base station telling, hey, give me permission to transmit. Then base station tells you, okay, I recognized you. Why don't you transmit in this band? After that, you will transmit. So many things happen. And all these happen within 10 seconds. Okay. That's why you won't realize within 10 seconds, you will be able to open your Google Chrome and go to the web page you want to go. But all that is happening because the underlying technology is also supporting it. Next, how does the same mobile work if you are in sleep and wake up mode? And this is the normal mode in which your mobile is. Whether your screen is off or not off is not the question here. Your radio might be off. Okay. That is internally protocol is switching it off. That is, it will put your radio to sleep for some time to save power. And periodically, it will be waking up to check from the base station. Is there anything for me? That is that paging message. It keeps on periodically checking for that paging message. Okay. Now there is one more advantage in this, right? Because I am only sleeping waking up and trying to connect to the same base station, I need not detect all 504 combinations. I can just detect that particular base station, only one combination. Okay. And when I decode the paging message, if it says there is no data for you, you can sleep again. Otherwise, you have to remain on so that you will have to transmit or receive data. Okay. Yeah, I think these I have already covered. So all this is applicable. Whatever I have explained until now is applicable for eMTC, which addresses the machine type communications using LTE by having power saving mode and enhanced DRX. I'll cover both these soon. And it has a reduced device cost and better coverage. So this is that power saving mode which I was telling about. See, you became connected, but then you went to sleep. Periodically, only in these green regions, you'll go and check whether there is some information for me. For a lot of time, if you don't get any information, you'll further reduce the power and go into something called this kind of DRX, where you check again periodically, but at an increased interval. Okay. So it's like first you will check whether there is something for me in the connected state only, but then you will further go to a deeper sleep. So this is called light sleep. This is called deep sleep, basically. So now, so based on your transaction or the tracking area update, see this, maybe I'll zoom it. Hopefully you can see it better then. Yeah. See, release 8, the first ever release, right? Supported only 2.56 seconds of sleeping time. So if you had a transaction every 15 minutes, this is the amount of months your battery would last, 3.7 months. If you had a transaction every 15 minutes, okay? If you had a transaction every 1 hour, same battery would last for 8.51 months. And similarly, if you had a transaction only once per week, it would last for 13.5 months. Look at this amazing thing here. Once per day is 13.2, once per week is 13.5, once per month or once per year, it's not so much different. It will be in the second decimal place. That's why it is not put up there. So you can afford to have once per week or even once per day. That and once per year don't make too much of a difference if your sleep time is just 2.56 seconds maximum sleep time. So then people started proposing for higher sleep times, especially for IoT devices. So if we increase the sleep time up to 1 minute, let's say up to 1 minute, if we increase the sleep time, then see this. If you have only one transaction per day, the battery which was giving you 13 months will now give you 85 months roughly. Okay. You just by increasing the amount of sleep time to 1 minute. Okay. So currently LTE for broadband supports only 10.46 seconds. For broadband, I am telling, that is for data and voice. Why? Because if somebody is making a call, at least within 10 seconds, you should be able to connect and start the conversation, right? You cannot tell, I make a call now and the recipient will receive it after 1 minute. So that is why the broadband is capped at 10.24 seconds. But for IoT, they have now made it some weird number that is coming up because of the number of bits allocated. It is something like 2644 seconds. You can calculate how many minutes it turns out to be. Roughly 42 minutes or something, 40 minutes or something it turns out to be. So they have made it around 40 minutes maximum for IoT devices. So any IoT device which is doing one transaction per hour, right? Typically that is the case. 15 minutes or 1 hour. Very rarely you will have per day. Smart meters and all can be per day. So 15-minute or 1 hour transactions using a 40-minute sleep time, the battery will last for 18 months. Roughly 18 months it will last. Okay. So 1.5 years once you can change the battery, which is a very good step compared to, say, the first version of LTE, which was supporting only 2.56 seconds. There it was lasting only for 8 months. Okay. So what we learned was, if we can afford more sleep time, then we can save battery and we can support IoT devices. Similarly, with NB-IoT, as I told you, it operates on 200 kilohertz bands. It can support lot of subscribers, and similar to LTE-M, it will support DRX and power saving, and it will give extended coverage. So both these technologies, just the operating bandwidth is different. There it is 1.4 megahertz. This one is 180 kilohertz. Okay, and it can be deployed within GSM bands like this, or in between two LTE bands in the guard band, or within an LTE band itself, one PRB, that one physical resource block pair I showed you, that is 180 kilohertz actually. That can be reserved for NB-IoT. So all this can be done. So it is very flexible. This is some comparison of LoRa, which you know as an IoT technology, and these technologies. See, LoRa can go up to 15 kilometers, but look at our eMTC, it can go up to 100 kilometers. NB-IoT can also go up to 35 kilometers. However, LoRa is on unlicensed band, but these are on licensed bands, which means you have to pay more money than LoRa. But operating bandwidth is higher, and somebody was mentioning about security. When you go for standardized solution, you will invariably have much better security than the non-standard solutions. One more big problem with unlicensed band is interference, right? So if you have a microwave operating at 2.4 gigahertz, it will start interfering with your IoT device, and so on. And of course, they offer slightly better rates compared to LoRa also. Same thing in terms of complexity reduction within LTE itself. Our old LTE, it was this category 4, it was supporting complete like 18 megahertz or 20 megahertz bandwidth it used to support. When they changed that to the category 1, remember category 1 was the first IoT device. There it supported only 10 Mbps. Still it had 2 antennas. Okay, but the reduction in complexity was, if this was 100%, this was 80% modem complexity. This was only 20% reduction. So they thought it is not so useful if I simply keep supporting lot of big bandwidths. We will support only 1.08 megahertz, or basically 1.4 megahertz, which is the allocation size, and we will support only 1 Mbps in both uplink and downlink, and that became this category M1 device, and that complexity is only 20% compared to the original LTE device, which is there on your phones right now. So compared to your phones, the LTE in your IoT has only 20% complexity. Okay, and same thing for NB-IoT. NB-IoT has only 15% complexity. It is very similar to the LTE M1, but bandwidth is further reduced, 180 kilohertz. Okay, and please don't get confused with full and half duplex to the full duplex communication, where transmission and reception are happening together. Here, full duplex doesn't mean basically transmission and reception are happening together. It means something slightly different. Full duplex communication means you can do transmission and reception at the same time, yes, but using FDD, that they are all both happening on different frequencies. Full duplex communications is where they can happen on same frequency also. So don't get confused with that. Okay. Half duplex means at that time you are doing only downlink or uplink. So NB-IoT is that. At the same time, you cannot be having both uplink and downlink. That is, as a base station, for example, you cannot be having uplink reception as well as downlink transmission. You cannot be having at the same time. Because of these things, the modem complexity reduced. So what we have learned until now is LTE by default was very good for broadband. To make it compatible for IoT, all that people needed to do was increase the sleep time, number one thing, reduce the amount of modulation schemes, that is have only BPSK, QPSK, reduce the amount of bandwidth, and reduce the peak transmission power. That has not been reduced too much, by only by 3 dB, but still. And of course, have only one antenna. So because of that, we have a device now using LTE, but its complexity is only 15 to 20% of the original LTE. Okay, so this is how we made LTE efficient for Internet of Things. 4 main points. Okay, don't ever forget this. The 4 points are reduced modulation, reduced bandwidth, okay, increased sleeping time, reduced number of antennas and transmission power. These are the 4 points. That's it. If you make all this, your existing LTE can become applicable for IoT. Okay, so let's take a couple of case studies. This is from mostly my PhD work, which has also gone into the LTE standards, by the way. So how we actually did it. So at this point, I would like to acknowledge my PhD University of British Columbia, Vancouver, and our industry partner Sierra Wireless, because we were able to develop all these solutions, present it to 3GPP, that is the standardizing body for LTE, and some of these solutions actually went into the standards. Okay, so that's what is our biggest challenge here. We have to support low data rate, delay tolerant operations, support a massive number of devices, reduce the energy consumption, improve the coverage. And we have to do all this by making minimal changes to the existing LTE. Because if you say I'll make a lot of changes, they'll say, okay, we won't standardize it. Go approach some proprietary standards. If you want to go to the standards, it should be a minor variation on the standard only. You have to achieve something big, but using a minor variation. So now you can understand why my PhD was challenging, hopefully, because I can not only just propose a new solution, that new solution has to be very much compatible to the standard, and it should also cause minimal disruption in the standard. So with all these challenges, I went for a PhD, and finally we were able to do something by the end of my PhD, that is around 3 years 9 months. We were able to develop what we called as that enhanced DRX. You remember that eDRX? We were one of the major players in developing that eDRX. So now let's learn about what is DRX and how it was improved for eDRX. Okay. So what is DRX? Discontinuous reception, which is same as your sleep and wake up mode. Okay. So let's say this is your connected state. You are connected, but then you have gone to sleep after some time. Okay. So let's say you are in deep sleep as of now. Remember that deep sleep state where you didn't get anything for a long time. So you went for deep sleep. So you wake up periodically. You resynchronize with your base station, only one PSS SSS combination. You will resynchronize. You will wait for the paging message. Okay. So until you wait for the paging message, you can be in light sleep. So let's assume you woke up here in the subframe 0. You immediately got PSS SSS in subframe 0 itself. Unfortunately, paging can come either in 0, 4, 5 or 9. Unfortunately, let's say your paging message is in 9 or is in 5. Okay, but you woke up here because you have to synchronize properly. So you wake up early. In the remaining time, you will go for light sleep until you wait for your paging message. Let's say at 5 you got your paging message. You decoded that paging message. If there is no data, you will go back to sleep. If there is data, you go to connected state. Simple, right? Very simple state diagram. And this paging decode process itself requires the decoding of control channel and data channel both. And this is pretty complicated. For control channel, you have to try some 44 hypotheses. And then you have to find out one among those 44 will tell where is your data. Using that, you have to decode your data. So a lot of processing happens. Whenever you just wake up from sleep, you have to do so much. So what we thought was, why don't we send something called a quick sleeping indication? Okay. So paging message is telling whether there is data or not. What if I can tell in the special case when there is no data, can I tell it before the paging message somehow? Okay. How? I'll come to it in the next slide. Think of it like this. I had to do all the paging message decoding to find out whether there is no data for me. But from somewhere else, if I can get this information that there is no data, I can immediately go back to sleep. See? So you wake up, you resynchronize. Somehow magically you get an indication that there is no data for you, or that is you can go back to sleep. If that QSI, quick sleeping indication, tells go to sleep, you immediately go to sleep. And only when it tells stay awake, you go decode the page. And still if it tells in the page there was some error or something and still there is no data for you, you go back to sleep, or you go to the connected state. So we introduced this new state called QSI detection state. Okay. Next we thought, okay, we will go one step further. Why should I am waking up to get the timing? I have to resynchronize with PSS and SSS because I want to align my timing correctly. What if my quick sleeping indication can also provide timing? Then I will just wake up, I'll get timing using my QSI and also get to know whether it indicates sleep or don't sleep. If it says sleep, I'll immediately go back to sleep. See, so what was taking basically 4 steps to go back to sleep when there is no data, in our best solution, it is in 1 step, right? You check, it says sleep, you sleep, finished. So now it's easier said than done. This is at a very high level I have put this. So how do you actually develop such a technology? So what we did was, so here of course there are 2 modes. This is called non-coverage enhanced mode. That means normal SNR. Don't worry too much about the terms. This is in normal SNR mode. This is in low SNR mode. Coverage enhanced mode means SNR is very low. Low SNR mode. Okay. So in that, when SNR is normal, what we did was, you remember this broadcast channel here? It used to come along with the synchronization. Just beside synchronization, you would get broadcast. So in that broadcast channel, we introduced this sleeping indication. You don't worry about these, how exactly we have introduced and all, don't worry. All you need to remember is in the broadcast channel, we introduced that quick sleeping indication. Okay, these are details on how exactly we introduced it. We cannot afford extra power for it. So some small amount of power we borrowed for it, then multiplied it by a pseudo random sequence and generated it and so on. Those are nitty-gritty details. All you need to remember is this quick sleeping indication comes on the broadcast channel. So as soon as I synchronize, sorry, I'm moving back and forth. As soon as I synchronize, I'll go decode the broadcast channel. If broadcast channel is telling me go to sleep again using my indicator, I'll go to sleep. Then I'll be in this state, right? I'll get synchronization. Broadcast channel tells me go to sleep, I go to sleep. If it says don't go to sleep, I'll stay awake. That's how we implemented this. Second method was, why go and decode another channel? I'll put it on top of PSS SSS itself. What we observed was LTE reserves there are 72 carriers at the center, but it uses only 64 for both PSS and SSS. So there are 9 unused subcarriers. Okay, 9 unused subcarriers are there. 63 are used in fact. So I will use those 9 unused subcarriers to put my indication. And my indication is just a simple BPSK message. Okay, this is the number of symbols. 1 means it is using only PSS. 2 means it is using both PSS and SSS. Okay, I need only 1 bit, right, to tell to go to sleep or don't go to sleep. 1 means go to sleep, 0 means don't go to sleep, something like that. So I can repeat it 9 times also and send. So we put it on the synchronization signals itself. Okay, we took the message to be 4 bits because what we thought was then we can address 16 different user groups. So for example, if my message is 1010, it means group number 10 has to sleep. Everyone except group number 10 can sleep, something like that. Okay, so 4-bit message we took. We did a simple extended Hamming code. Are you seeing all this? These are some things we teach in class, no? Communications. We teach them Hamming code, extended Hamming code. People think that these are all useless, or who will do new research using all this? Mine and many of my colleagues PhD, we owe it to our basics in communication. All we have done is BPSK, QPSK, Hamming codes, very, very simple solutions because they work really well for IoT. Okay, so simple 8,4 extended Hamming code we used. We encoded this message, put it on the PSS and SSS itself, and we were able to send the devices to sleep. Okay. See, these are some results we got. See this, when we put it on the broadcast channel, green line was its original performance. Okay. And after we put the performance degraded little bit because some part of the power we took for sending our signal, right? So performance degraded little bit, but it is again not too much. Okay. Actually it's the green dotted line. I mean, that why I'm telling little bit, not looking at the blue and the red curves. I'm looking at this green curve itself. See, yeah. See, the solid green line is here. There is one dotted green line. On that only there is a one red line. See, the dotted green line is the amount of degradation we had. It was extremely small. And we had already included our sleeping indication message from it, using only 5% of the power. So 95% of the power was given to the original broadcast. 5% was used for our sleeping indication. Okay. Similarly, when we put it on PSS, SSS also, see a very small degradation. Again, the dotted green line was observed. And these above lines were our message decoding probability. We had decent probability, like 90% of the time it would get decoded, which is more than enough actually for IoT devices, because benchmark in the standard says 90%. For any SNR above 5 dB, right, we were decoding with more than 90% accuracy. Okay, I'll show you in the table. This will become more visible. So see this, for example, for 10% error without our signal, it was happening at 0.35 dB. With our signal, it is happening at 0.55 dB. So only 0.2 dB degradation. Okay. Same for the synchronization channel. Without our signal, they were able to get BER of 10% at minus 4.4. With our signal, it became minus 3.6. So around 0.7 dB degradation, less than 1 dB degradation we had. And we were able to achieve extremely good false alarm. That is very reduced false alarm, 1% false alarm. If you with 200 milliseconds of processing. Okay. Good. So you understood, right? We gave a signal before the paging signal if the devices can go to sleep. Now in the second case, where I can make this signal give both timing and signal, we designed a signal which looks like this. The signal is always on subframe 1, 2, 6 and 7. Okay. User can wake up. Instead of doing PSS, SSS, directly do this signal, directly correlate for this signal. It will get timing message as well as sleeping message. Both it will get, and it will be able to go back to sleep early. Okay. So previously we were introducing it on existing broadcast, existing synchronization. Now we put a new message in the data channel itself. Of course, it will waste some resources, but it will save you a lot of power. And this is what we got as the results. Okay. So basically, this is, we should always compare with the existing. Remember, what existing signal was there? PSS, SSS, right? They would try and detect, we would try and detect them to get the timing. Okay, now we are telling don't detect PSS, SSS, detect our QSI signal instead. So blue is PSS, SSS here. See, in order to get timing from that, I would require to accumulate that for at least 200 milliseconds. See this? Around 200 milliseconds if I want false alarm rate of 1%. But with our signal, a new signal in the data, it required only 50 milliseconds of accumulation. So we gave the timing, we gave it within 50 milliseconds of accumulation. But the original thing gave it with 200 milliseconds of accumulation. At what SNR? Minus 14.2 dB. Very, very low SNR. Okay? That is why you need accumulation. If SNR is high, you don't need accumulation. Okay. And this is again one more comparison. For different sleeping time length, our solution can give you this much efficiency compared to the existing solution without the sleeping indication. So right now in LTE, as I told you, for broadcast only broadband, only 10.24 is supported. On that, we can still have 63% energy efficiency compared to the existing standard. Okay, so this was one way of doing energy efficient LTE by sending a sleeping indication early sleeping indication or quick sleeping indication. Okay, so I told you this has been standardized, right? It has not been standardized with the same name. Now LTE has introduced something called a resynchronization signal, RSS. Along with PSS, SSS, there is a new signal called RSS, which does the exact same job as what our QSI is doing. So in the end, standards are also political. We submit something, lot of companies have to agree on it. Then there are big players like Qualcomm, Huawei and all. Finally, whatever consensus everyone reaches, that will be standardized. So when I say it was standardized, the idea was standardized. The exact signal was not looking like our signal. It was slightly different. But the idea of giving a quick sleeping indication or having a newer resynchronization signal got standardized. So this was in the downlink. As you all know, we discussed that time, right? Whatever you do in the downlink, it is for reception, and reception consumes only 1/3 the power of transmission. So to make a technology efficient, if you just do something in the downlink, it is not enough. You are only occupying 1/3 territory. Remaining 2/3 territory is occupied by transmission. So we did that for transmission. So purposefully I took NB-IoT here because the downlink case was for MTC. For transmission, we did something in NB-IoT. Remember, this was our uplink frame where we had multiple data symbols, 12 data symbols and 2 pilot symbols. So what is the effective data rate? It is your transport block size minus 24 because you add a 24-bit CRC to whatever message you have. So actual message size is whatever transport block you are trying to send, that minus 24 divided by number of subframes you are taking times the time per subframe. Time per subframe is always 1 millisecond. So this TSF is always 1 millisecond. So if I take that millisecond to the top, it becomes kbps, right? Dividing by 1 millisecond means data rate is in kbps. So it's TBS minus 24 by number of subframes. That is your data rate in kbps. Okay. So see what is happening here. CFO is the amount of frequency offset you have in your system. And standard says you can have up to 100 Hertz offset. If I have 100 Hertz offset, and if your data is occupying 110 subframes, okay, so if I have to send 72 bits of data, if I have 100 Hertz as the offset, at minus 15.5 dB SNR, it requires 110 subframes to be sent. That is 110 milliseconds. So your data rate is just 0.44 kbps. Okay, don't worry about the last column. I'll explain that later. Similar, but if your frequency offset goes down to 50 Hertz, instead of 110, you require only 100 subframes. And if it goes to as low as 10 Hertz, then instead of 110, you require only 80 subframes. So your effective data rate increased from 0.44 kbps to 0.60 kbps. It looks very small, but if you see the percentage increase, it's pretty good. It's almost like 35 to 40% increase in the data rate. Okay. And this last column is the duty cycle. Remember that how often you transmit. Your on time is only 0.1%, your on time is only 1%, or your on time is 10%. Okay. So if your on time is 10%, that is say 10 seconds you are on, 90 seconds you are off. In such a case, somehow if you can ensure that the CFO, the frequency offset is within 10 Hertz, then you can save 25% of the energy, regardless of the duty cycle. Even if you operate at 1%, at 0.1% also, you save around 22% of the energy. So now what we found out was one way to save energy is by somehow reducing the frequency offset. Again, it is easily said than done. Okay, because standard itself is telling if your frequency offset is within 100 Hertz, you are good. Now we are telling no, go to 10 Hertz. As in, if your original offset is F, be within F plus or minus 10. Okay. So also we found out one more thing. if we reduce the frequency offset to 10 Hertz, that is this third column here, you can also send more data. See, instead of sending 72 bits, you can actually send 424 bits. Then if 100 Hertz was the offset, it required 448 subframes. But if 10 Hertz is the offset, it requires only 304 subframes. Or in other words, if your data rate was 0.89, it can jump up to 1.32. Okay. Again, this is almost 50% jump increase in the data rate in the transmission, and it will consume less energy also. Amazing, right? I mean, normally this is contradicting, right? If I want to send more data, I consume more energy. But what we are telling is, if you want to send more data, but if you ensure that the frequency offset is small, then you can actually send that more data and you can actually consume less energy also. Okay, so how we did it? Originally, the CFO was, the frequency offset was obtained by taking correlation between the pilots. Remember, pilots used to come periodically and people used to correlate between these two, take their angle and divide it by this one. Basically, it's based on the angle of the correlation of the pilots. What we built was, don't get lost, this is not machine learning. ML is our standard communication maximum likelihood. Okay, we built a very simple maximum likelihood. Basically, we did an estimator. We built an estimator, and using that estimator, you need not go into the details of this. You can just say whatever was correlation based got replaced by a maximum likelihood based estimator, and that was able to give us better CFO estimation. So here are the results. See, original correlation based, it would not go to 30 Hertz. No, it would not go to 30 Hertz even with 128 subframes. Sorry. So this is a CDF. So this is the probability that the CFO is less than or equal to 30 Hertz. See, it's around 0.48. So only 48% of the time you are able to estimate the CFO with an accuracy of around 30 Hertz. But look at our solutions. With 64 and 128 subframes, more than 95% of the time, we were able to accurately estimate the CFO within 10 Hertz. So see, this axis is actual CFO minus estimated CFO. It is within 10 Hertz 95% of the time. This is not even within 30 Hertz. And that too, only 48% of the time it is within 30 Hertz. So see, somehow we were able to get that magic number of reducing the CFO to 10 Hertz. This just took 1.5 years of effort. Okay. And I always tell this because sometimes I don't know, whatever, some of you may believe in divine power, some of you might not believe. I have had papers where the work took only 6 months, but the paper revision and acceptance took another 1 year. This was the case where the work took 1 year and the paper got accepted within 4 months. So this, it was a lot of effort. The results, when I put the result and the expressions, it looks ultra simple, but to get to this stage, it took a lot of time. And see, we were able to achieve so much energy efficiency, especially if you go for higher data rates, our solution is more and more efficient. So this eta 2 with P equal to 0.95 is ours. So this is like 63% more energy efficient than the original solution. So remember, we got 60% better receiver. We also got a 60% better transmitter because of this solution. So overall, we became 60% more energy efficient than the existing solutions. Okay. So again, to summarize, in reception or in receiver, the way to make LTE more energy efficient is by increasing the sleeping time, reducing the power consumption, reducing the transmitter power and the number of antennas. Okay. These are the two main things. There are two additional things. Reduction in number of antennas, reduction in bandwidth is the third thing. Operate on lower bandwidth, you will do better because complexity will reduce. These are the three main things, and have increased sleep time. These are the four things you have to remember in downlink, that is reception. In transmission, reduce the frequency offset. error in the frequency offset estimation. If you reduce the error in the frequency offset, then you can have better energy efficiency. That's what we showed in transmission. Obviously, if you reduce transmission power also, you will have improved energy efficiency. But we have not explored that part yet. We mainly dealt with reducing the frequency offset. So these were ways to make LTE energy efficient. With this, I'll end my session. If you have any questions, you have 10 more minutes to ask those questions. These are the references. Couple of my papers are also there at the end. So any questions? You can either put it in the chat box. Okay, voice is breaking. I saw it late. Okay. Any general questions on LTE as such? So to be extremely honest, this session had very little math and very little detail. The next section will be much more intense than this session, because NOMA and GrantFee are both upcoming technologies. So it will not be so direct. Here you might have seen that maybe some of you are familiar with some terminology here. You're able to relate to some of the terminologies like subframe, slot, pilot symbol, all these. But in the next session, they will be slightly different because they are upcoming, mostly research oriented technologies. So it will be more intense in the next session. Please let me know if you have any questions. As I told you, it's better if you ask me more questions, because you should be benefited the most from this talk. Please give the importance of QSI. Okay. Dr. Prasuna, I'll answer this and then you can ask your question. So importance of QSI, as I told you, as the name says, it's a quick sleeping indication. So especially when there is no data for you, you get an information that, hey, there is no data, sleep now only. So that is the importance of QSI. And further, if I extend its importance, you remember we have to always resynchronize to the base station whenever we wake up. Now, if I can, and what we do to resynchronize, we will again correlate with the PSS and SSS. What we are telling is, if I correlate with my own signal, that QSI signal, if I can design a QSI signal which can also give the timing, then when I wake up, I can correlate with that QSI signal itself and think like this. What if I have two different signals? One is for sleep, one is for don't sleep. If I correlate with both and see whichever is coming, I get the timing as well as I get the information whether to sleep or not. Whenever it says sleep early, it's a big advantage for you, right? Even if you sleep early by 50 milliseconds, it's a big advantage for you. So when we made this, and when we put a poster in one of the conferences, Globecom, you might have heard, it's a very reputed conference. So we had a poster session there. The poster was titled "Sleep Quickly, Save Battery." So it doesn't mean you literally sleep quickly. It means make your protocol go to sleep quickly and you can save your battery. Yeah. One minute. I'll have to unmute Dr. Prasuna. I don't know if I can unmute. So the organizer, if you can unmute. Until then, I will just answer. How scalability depends on multi-carrier and multi-antenna. Of course, it depends on both, because if, for example, I have a multi-antenna system, and if I don't make it backward compatible with, say, single antenna systems, it won't be scalable. Because every time you cannot have a solution which always works with more than one antenna. You might have to fall back to single antenna. So that's how it should be backward compatible. Now, it should become scalable because it will become scalable with multi-antenna because the amount of power consumption. So we all know that MIMO systems, you can distribute the power in an optimal manner. I won't go into details. There are many ways to optimally allocate power over multiple antennas. So you can continue using the same amount of power, but distribute over higher number of antennas and so on to achieve the same or better performance. So it will become scalable that way to, say, higher data rates. Like having more antennas, I can provide higher data rate also, because it is adding one more dimension to my entire problem, right? So that way it becomes scalable. Same thing with multi-carrier. If you could achieve a data rate of X with 3 carriers, I can mostly achieve a data rate of 2X with 6 carriers. Okay, so that way, if you do multi-antenna, multi-carrier support, and it should be like, basically, I just define what is the number of carriers I have. If I keep on increasing it, I can scale it up and down to different requirements. So that's what it means by scalability based on multi-carrier and multi-antenna. And which is the best tool to be used for NB-IoT? What do you mean, which tool? MATLAB has an inbuilt toolbox for NB-IoT. If you want to do some simulations, I always recommend MATLAB's NB-IoT toolbox. Otherwise, you have to sit and code on your own. You can do it using Python, or you can use MATLAB. But I think MATLAB 2019 and above has NB-IoT. 2020 has both NB-IoT and 5G. How to calculate range of coverage with bandwidth? No, range of coverage is not based on bandwidth. Bandwidth is the amount of frequencies that your message occupies. The range of coverage is based on the center frequency of operation. The lower the center frequency, the better range you have. It's not based on the bandwidth. Okay. And then what is the GBR and non-GBR in LTE? My God, I don't know what is this. Can you give me its expansion? I'm very bad at acronyms. What is?
Hello, sir.
Oh, yeah.
Can I ask? Good morning, sir.
Yeah,
Very
please.
informative section. Thank you for a very informative section, sir. So actually, I have a doubt. Still, NB-IoT is still under research, but how it is feasible to implement any of our ideas in NB-IoT based technology?
Yeah, see, one way I showed you, right? Like the way we did was we found out that reducing the frequency offset improves the energy efficiency. So like that, you'll have to create an NB-IoT system. Believe me, it doesn't take more than 1 week in MATLAB. If you use that toolbox, you will have a working NB-IoT system. So let me give you one simple example. You can either pick a downlink channel or pick an uplink channel. Okay. Now we all know that uplink is more intensive, right? In the sense that power intensive. So let's say you pick the NB-IoT uplink channel. You found that in that uplink channel, right now they are sending only 2 pilots in a subframe. Let's say you found that sending 3 pilots helps you estimate data better, because of which you can improve data rate also. See, data rate can improve with multiple reasons, due to multiple reasons, right? One is your coding rate will be influencing the way your data gets decoded. That is your channel code rate. If you use code rate 1/3 and use code rate 1/2, 1/3 will perform better than 1/2 because it has more parity bits. Okay, so you can play with code rate, you can play with the number of pilot symbols, and you can look at how the system is behaving when you increase or decrease these things. And based on that, you can calculate, because the standard always says use 2 pilot symbols, use a code rate of 1/3. Standard suggests these things, but you can vary and you can see whether the performance is improving by one or both of these variations. If you find it improving, you can always report that as a result.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. And one more doubt. So actually, I'm more concentrate on like this to build a project like NBIOT based precision agriculture. Like that, I have some ideas, but I'm lagging where how I should build. Like still no more still modules are not available. Like how LoRa module is available, the same way still it's not implemented, no sir.
Yeah, it is partly true, I would say. NB-IoT chipset has not come to India as such, but I forgot the name of the company. There is this Professor Kiran Kuchi from Hyderabad. He has his own startup and they are manufacturing NB-IoT chipsets. So soon you may get some of those in the market. See, one more thing is when you think of projects, right? Don't always think of implementation in hardware. I have to show something working on a chipset. You can always show a proof of concept in MATLAB. So what you do is you collect your agricultural data, whatever data you want to transmit, etc. You collect it. Maybe it's an image, okay? Crop image, you want to send it through NB-IoT. You collect that image, learn how to transmit that through NB-IoT in MATLAB itself. Because finally what that chipset is doing will be identical to what MATLAB is doing. Just that the chipset does it using say firmware and C code, and MATLAB is doing it using its own code. So you should always build a prototype on MATLAB so that all your algorithms, the protocols, everything will be finalized. Then once that is working, you can port it to the chipset. That is not a big effort. Okay.
Yeah, thank you, sir.
Okay. So yeah, there's someone asked me about guaranteed bit rate, right? Okay, those are slightly higher layer things. So in LT, we have this concept of bearers, like constant bearers and whatever dynamic bearers and so on. Okay, basically all these bearers means there is some placeholder to make sure that you will always get service. You can think of it like that. So when we have this guaranteed bitrate scheme, it means that don't worry, whenever you request, I'll make sure that I'll give you at least this much data rate. And how it is done, it is beyond the scope of this one. So as I told you, there is a dedicated control channel for it. Some part of the bandwidth will be reserved for you and you will be given some guaranteed data rate there. Okay. And non-guaranteed bit rate is opposite. You are not being reserved anything. You have to compete like everyone else. Now, when you are competing, two people can collide, because of which they may not get any data. Someone, if they don't collide, they might end up getting some data. So that is guaranteed and non-guaranteed bitrate. Slightly higher layer concepts actually. I'm sorry, I'm very bad with acronyms. Like LTE has 1,000 acronyms. Like I know what things do, but I don't know to call them GBR or non-GBR. Yeah, the PPTs, I'll share it after both the sessions. I will send both the presentations to I think whoever was contacting me through email. I will send it to them. I think that's Professor Mallikarjun. I think I will send it to him.
Yes, sir. Please send it, sir. I will share it to all the participants, sir.
Yeah. One more, any other question? Yeah, non-GBR. Yeah, range, that I told. Any other questions?
Yeah, dear participants, if you have any questions, please ask, sir.
So I just want to know, most of the participants are faculty, is it?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Are there any students?
Some research scholars are there, sir.
Okay. No, I just wanted to know because many of us think that doing research in all these is very tough and all, right? I would say more than tough, it requires very keen observation skills. I mean, you should become good at one technology and you should be able to observe very well. Like this is the biggest learning I had in my PhD, that if you can observe things properly, you will be able to do very good research. And honestly, that 10 and 100, no, I observed it through accident. I was supposed to feed 100 hertz. I forgot to put a 0. I had fed 10 hertz and suddenly I started getting good results. I got like, okay, what is one more thing? Whenever you get good results, you should suspect more. whenever I get bad results, I'm actually very happy that something is not working. I should fix it. Whenever something works, I'm super scared. We have to go and check why it worked. So I kept on debugging. I didn't understand how come suddenly I'm getting good results. Then I went and found that instead of entering 100, I have entered 10 at a place accidentally. So that itself we took as a challenge. Oh, with 10, if it can reduce so much, is there a way we can reduce the frequency offset from 100 to 10? Okay. Other than energy efficiency, which other parameter can be taken for optimization? Latency. But see, again, everything gets boiled down to energy efficiency. The thing is this, at the end of the day, for all these IoT devices, you will have to show that you will increase their battery life. Okay. Or other parameters like energy efficiency, if you don't want to take for IoT devices, the other parameter you can take is latency. But if you do energy efficiency, it can indirectly absorb latency also there. Okay. And other ones you can optimize are for outage probability. I don't know if you have heard of this. Sorry. Outage probability is the probability that you don't get service. That you can also reduce. That can be another parameter for optimization. Some people also do improve like aggregated throughput, that is total number of users or the throughput of all the users. That is another parameter. I am not able to hear Mr. Jayanto. He was asking something.
Hello, sir. Jayanta Rai Chaudhary, sir. Can you repeat your question, sir? Fine, sir. I think he's not responding.
No problem. He can ask it in the next session also. Any other questions?
Yes, dear participants, if you have any questions, please ask. It is an opportunity. Sir, LTE Advanced, is it already using it, sir? As of
Yes, we are using the 2010 release, which I told, no, that was the initial release for LTE Advanced only. Actually, see, there is not much change, especially in terms of mobile device. There is not much change. In base station, there is better support for MIMO in LTE Advanced. That is the main change.
Thank you, sir. Sir, one question is there in chat box, sir.
Yeah, I'll check. Any other tools other than MATLAB? I think, you see, if you want to stick to the protocols, it becomes very difficult. MATLAB is the best tool, I would say. Otherwise, you can always use Python. You can, whatever. See, nowadays, all these FEC, that is channel coding, channel modeling, all these are available in Python also. Similar, yeah. Or if you want a more difficult way, we have one project like that running. So we have some Texas Instruments processor. On that, we are trying to implement everything in NB-IoT. So that is, of course, with an industry partner. It's a big project, and we are trying to bring out an NB-IoT chipset to the market. So there we are coding in C. Yes.
Sir, I think it is not a question for you, sir. I think because I unmuted all, I think
Okay.
that they will ask questions. So they may
Okay.
be doing some other conversations.
Okay. I think we can end this session, right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you very much, sir,
Thank
for
you.
sharing your valuable knowledge to the
No problem.
participants. Again, we will join back at 11:30, sir.
11:30. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Fine. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, dear participants, we'll take a break for 15 minutes. We'll join back at 11:30.